my name is Dr. Kouzel, and I'm the Oboe professor at Illinois State University. In this video today, I'm going to be going over the ILMEA All-State Etude from the Ferling book. This is number 27. Now, as a judge, there are a few objective measures that I'm going to be listening for when I hear students auditioning. The first one is, are you playing the right notes? So, are you playing the right accidentals? Are you playing within the key signature, etc.? This one I think is particularly important, rhythm. Rhythm and slow fairlings are probably one of the harder things within this etude and within all the slow fairlings, that I think that if you don't practice with a metronome, you probably aren't going to be getting the right rhythm. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that for the majority of this video. Intonation. So we as oboe players know we should always be playing with a tuner, and there are a few intervals and key areas within this etude in particular that we're going to want to hone in on, because if they're not right in tune, it's really going to stick out to the judge. And then finally, are you playing what's written on the page? So are you playing the correct dynamics, articulations, etc.? So let's talk about rhythm for a moment. I pulled up on my computer a free metronome app to use, and I particularly did this just to show you that there are a lot of advanced metronomes that are quite accessible to everybody. So this piece is marked 3/4, but 8th note gets the beat, and the 8th note is set to 96. So what that means is we're actually going to have 6 main beats within each measure. So we can think about this as one measure of 2 3/4s, or one measure of 6/4. So I think when you're starting off early with practicing, you might want to actually do 2 3/4s within a measure. So with this metronome app, I'm going to set it to 3/4. And so what that's going to give you is the downbeat of every measure and then the middle of every measure. And it sounds like this. 1, middle, 1, etc. And then the more you go and the longer you feel comfortable with playing 2 3/4s within a measure, you might want to think about just testing your internal pulse even further to just giving yourself the downbeat of every measure, which would be setting the metronome to 6/4. And that's what this would sound like. Etc. And again, it's a little harder this way when you're just given one big downbeat. So I would again start with the 3/4, so giving yourself the beginning of every measure and then the middle of every measure, and then advancing to 6/4. Another important thing when it comes to practicing this is I would really recommend stripping away the piece from the ornamentation. So right away in measure 3, we have an ornament. I would recommend first playing it without. And then just looking ahead, we have another one in measure 23. So I would play without that turn first, just to hear how the rhythm goes. 2, 3, 4, 5. sounds pretty different without the ornamentation. But that's gonna probably be the best way to ensure that you're really playing the right rhythms first. And then eventually, once you become comfortable enough with that, then you'll put in the ornaments. I'll play measure 23 again, this time with the turn, and then I'll go a little ahead. So on and so forth. I'm now going to talk a little bit about intonation because again, there are a few moments here, especially different intervals that are, if they're not in tune, they'll really stick out to a judge. I want to talk about the octave jump, the slurred, of all things, octave jump in measure 30. As we know, it's really difficult to slur into a high note such as that E flat in measure 30. So I would play this out of context, out of time. Just isolating the low E flat and the high E flat, slurring and feeling and kind of getting a sense of how that feels for you. So even there, I didn't have the cleanest pop up to that E flat, which told me I didn't prepare my air and I didn't voice properly. So voicing, raising the back of your tongue in your mouth, and also raising your eyebrows can help pop that up, in addition to thinking about crescendoing with your air into that high note. And that time it popped out pretty easily. I didn't have to do much work. You always want to avoid biting those high notes up because that's going to mess with the pitch. So this is the best way of practicing that without getting that E flat to go even sharper than it already wants to sound. And see, I didn't prepare my air enough there. That's what can happen. And it's always helpful to do that exercise really on any octave, but here it's extremely critical. Let's talk about measure 39 too, because we have a jump from G to E flat, which could also, now I'm thinking more about intonation here, because luckily we don't have to slur to that high E flat, but the G and E flat have to be in tune. So already my E flat really wanted to be sharp. And then we have a little bit of an arpeggio here. And of course we know with the oboe, every single note within that measure has its own particular tendencies, which is why I think it's extremely important to just play out of time and out of context, go note by note and see where every individual note wants to land. So for instance, my B flat typically wants to be flat, so I might put a little up arrow on that, so when I'm playing it in context, I can remind myself ahead of time to raise it a little bit. And again, raising it with voicing and then also with our airspeed. Those are just a few tips and tricks for going about practicing the slow Ferling Etude. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. Good luck with your auditions.